Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. I am your host, Stephen Heidecker, but this is actually a very special MMR episode, Mormon Media Reviews. It could be a hybrid because, of course, Haleigh, you have written a book, but this is actually...
I have it back here on display, too.
Oh, that's great. So, and until recently was available at Deseret News, Deseret Books back in the day. And but before we get started with the story, this is actually I think it's going to be a very, very important episode. Because, of course, many of you know that Haleigh was a very active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And then she has transitioned out. And she wants to tell a little bit about her journey since transitioning. And many of you have probably seen her on her interview on Mormon Stories. Haleigh, welcome. Haleigh Markar, welcome to the program.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here and talk.
And it's always exciting to have my very special co-host, Rebecca Biblioteca, is in the house. How are you doing today?
Awesome. Happy to be back, especially for this interview. I have to say, I was very much looking forward to this interview today.
Yes. Oh, it's a very cool thing that we're able to do. And really, I kind of look at it this way, is that, how I remember watching your interview. I can't believe it's last summer. Was it last summer or was it the summer before now? Oh my goodness.
It was May 2021. So it's been over a year.
2023. Oh my goodness. That's amazing. So I remember watching it. And my mom watched it as well, and we really enjoyed it. I remember talking to Sandra Tanner, and we were at Sandra Tanner's place, and she was talking about you. And yes, and she's like, "Oh, I hope she does okay with that Mormon Stories interview. Her world's like all the stuff's happening, and then she's going to go on there." And of course, Allison is a good mutual friend of ours, and she was there to help you in this very difficult time as well. So that's when I first heard about you. And then with interest, watched your interview on Mormon Stories. And we kind of want to do what's happened since then and where you're transitioning. Because this is the thing, you are now attend a evangelical church. You've gone to various churches. So we want to kind of talk about your journey with that. But let me ask you just this quick question. What has your world been like since going on Mormon Stories? Maybe just give an update a little bit about how things are going for you. And then we can start talking about your journey.
All right, so it's so much. Sandra Tanner was right, and Allison was so kind. Everyone was worried for me because for me, my faith journey was very fast. I, you could see on my history of my YouTube channel that my videos were very faithful, defending the church always, and then it was like overnight something changed, and that's really how it felt for me. So it was a couple of different things that had happened that I feel like truly looking back now, it was probably over the course of like a year or two that my heart had kind of been opened up to certain things, softened in certain ways. So I feel like I was really being prepared for my faith transition. But then when it came down to it, I like read the CES letter, just started studying all these things in the Joseph Smith papers, gospel topic essays, just consuming so much content and information and learning. And I immediately was like, okay, the church isn't what it claims to be. The Book of Mormon isn't what I thought it was. Joseph Smith isn't who I thought he was. And I felt okay with that, as scary as that, is to accept. It was just an immediate thing for me. I didn't really have to wrestle with it too much. So pretty much like once I decided, I did not believe the church to be what it was. It was actually on that Easter Sunday. So it was like April 4th or something like that. Coincidentally, General Conference was on Easter Sunday. And at that time, I was married and I had been telling my now ex-husband, there are things that I have questions about, and he didn't want to get into it. He pretty much didn't want to talk to me about what I was learning at all. So it was something that I was pretty much going through on my own with a couple close friends talking to me, but he was not involved in it at all. He didn't want to go over anything, but in his family's group chat, they were talking about the General Conference talks and whatnot. And I just couldn't bite my tongue. So that was kind of when I announced to them that I didn't believe anymore. I started kind of giving some pushback. And so really it was just like over a couple days that I had realized, nope, this isn't true. And now I'm about to start telling people I don't think it's true anymore.
Well, and I think I want to clarify, I just make real clear to the audience here is that, of course, many of my audience members are faithful members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And one of the reasons I have a lot of different voices on, all the different voices, is because I think it's important that in this world we live in, I had Aaron Ra, one of the biggest atheists on YouTube, come on my program. I've had Christians come on. I've had people who are very faithful Mormons come on, and those who are maybe more progressive or nuanced. And I think it's really important. It can be very instructive because we're going to actually talk about this later on, but we're going to talk about the do's and don'ts of how you talk to somebody who's left the church. And I think this would be very instructive to you because for many of you, you have family members or friends who are leaving the church. And there's a lot of things that, as a matter of fact, I interviewed a gentleman who went from he converted to the Catholic Church. I just interviewed him on Saturday, and he even told me that there's a few questions you should not ask somebody who's going through a faith crisis. So we talked about that. So I think this is part of the conversation that we can have, a dialogue, a safe space, a neutral place where we're going to have these conversations. So you're saying we're on April 4th, which is actually the first day I ever talked to John DeLynn. April 4th of 2021 is the day that you started having you kind of came out to your family. Is that and would that be correct? And then kind of how did
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remember it was April 1st that I posted something kind of like jokingly on my Instagram. It was like a picture of me in a bikini on a rooftop at a pool. And I said something about like, I'm on a great and spacious building. And that was my kind of teasing way of showing my thoughts had shifted a little bit. I can find the exact date. I think whatever that Easter was in April of 2021 was pretty much the day I came out. So at least to my ex's family. And I think, yeah, it was Easter Sunday. April 4th. Yeah.
They probably thought it was a joke. Did they have any inkling, I mean, at all? Because, you were sort of thinking, but this is when you actually kind of made things more public. Did they have any idea? Or was this just like, oh my gosh, right out of the
No,
blue?
because it seriously was like immediate. Like I consumed so much content and learned so much. And I didn't really talk to anyone about it other than a couple of close friends. So no one had a clue, which was obviously very shocking.
Wow.
And really the things that I was saying were just like kind of some pushback about the prophets, as seers and revelators, and how can we actually trust them? It's general conference. We're listening to them speak, but how do we know when they're speaking as man versus speaking as a prophet? So I didn't like give some long email or speech to them announcing I'm leaving the church. What I did was just kind of show that my thoughts were not where they once were, and they weren't where their thoughts are. And so immediately they texted my ex-husband, he's my husband at the time, and we're like, we're really concerned. This is a slippery slope. We've already seen this before. We think she's too far gone. Like, it kind of set this thing in motion where now more pressure even was being put on my, at the time, husband to almost decide like, all right, what am I going to do about this? Because now she's kind of putting it out there. This isn't just something she's wrestling with alone or something just between us. I was being honest about it. And yeah, no one had a clue. I just kind of dropped that on everyone.
Well,
there were no signs, so to speak.
Okay, so I am curious because I am a reader, and actually I can remember the moment I was reading an atheist book when I became an atheist where I deconverted, reading a sentence. All it took was just like a short paragraph in a book called Letter to a Christian Nation by Sam Harris. Was there something that you read that was the final straw for you that was, okay, that's it, I'm out? Because that's what happened to me.
Yeah. So I have a very close friend who had previously left the church after reading anti-Mormon literature. And so she's the first person I went to about this because she came back to the church. So her name's Brittany Zika. She was the one I went to and said, all right, I know you've wrestled with this stuff before. Tell me how you reconciled it, because I don't know how to reconcile it. Obviously there was like Saints Unscripted stuff. lots of apologetic things that I was trying to make sense of. I was just listening to every podcast, reading all these articles, blogs, just so much information, like nonstop. I had AirPods in, listening to stuff, reading stuff. And I reached out to her to ask her if she could help me reconcile any of it. And she was unaware of a lot of the information too. So we like dove in together, texting each other, calling each other all day long. And there were a lot of things that we came across that we were like, okay, maybe I can make sense of this way. Maybe I can justify it that way. There was one podcast episode that I listened to, and I remember crying, thinking, I think there can still be a place for me in the church. I can be the voice of truth, that, Joseph Smith is not exactly who we thought he was, because that's why I got baptized as a convert at 15. I fell in love with Joseph Smith's story and everything that had happened with him, so I thought. And so even though that all came unraveling, I still felt like there are great things about the church and about the gospel. And at the end of the day, it's about Jesus and his atonement. And I can stay here because there's goodness here. And I can maybe be a voice for maybe some change within the church. But it was when I learned more about the temple, because obviously in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, everything is about getting you to the temple for your endowment, for your sealing, to get you to the highest level of the celestial kingdom. It is all in preparation for that. And I loved the temple. I never had a single bad experience there. I thought it was an amazing place. I worked very, very hard after being on church probation to get a temple recommend so that I could receive my endowment and get married in the temple. It meant so much to me. So then when I read about the history with, the Freemason stuff, and then about the penalties and the blood oaths and the horrific gestures accompanying those promises, I was like, this is evil. Like, my whole endeavor here is to figure out, like, if Jesus is really in this church, if this church is really being led by Christ, and if these prophets really do speak for God. And the fact that the temple, the most holy and sacred place on earth, has you doing these evil things, there's no way that could be true. That did me in. Absolutely not.
Well, I'm just
that
curious,
was my breaker.
because a lot of those penalties and stuff were taken out in 1990, historically with the temple. What would you, because again, I want to be very, very sensitive here, but why would you use the word evil? I'm just kind of curious why you would use that to describe what you temple.
Well, because for one, promising to avenge people, like, that has nothing to do with Jesus or God. And then depicting motions of, like, killing yourself, slitting your throat, stabbing, like cutting your insides out, like stabbing yourself. That's evil. No, like, in what world would God ask you to make promises to him by doing those symbols of something so harmful? That's how I felt.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
Other people might have a different perspective, but to me, I'm like, that is not of God.
Okay.
That's not a holy thing.
Well, and it's interesting because my Rebecca's introduction to the world was when you came on to do an episode about all your crazy temple stories. Rebecca, perhaps you want to chime in here on kind of riff on this a little bit if you want.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted for a minute. My dog is barking, so I'm trying to keep it all good. So no, I in some of your, I had heard you say this before, in some of your videos, Haleigh, and I was like, oh gosh, I can relate to this so well, because I've never had a moment in the temple where I didn't feel really anxious, really scared, really upset. Of course, I went through in the 90s where there were, as we discussed, like you said, some things that were a lot more disturbing. But I found what you said extremely interesting about how you kind of deconstructed it and had this whole vibe about it. I mean, I think in my whole life, I've only gone maybe 6 times, because I had, unlike you, so many disturbing, maybe funny looking back, right,
Mm-hmm.
Steve? Maybe some of them are funny, but not really. It's very stressful, and it is the pinnacle of your LDS life, and you do everything in order to get that recommend. So I was very interested to hear you talk about that and just the way you felt. And so once you deconstructed that moment in the temple, you're saying that that was pretty much it for you. You just recognized, if I don't want the pinnacle, what do I want? I mean, can you talk a little bit about that? That's kind of how I understood you to say it.
Yes. And when I look back on my experiences in the church, it's a lot of justifications, mental gymnastics. Like, for a lot of people, their first time in the temple, they're uncomfortable with the clothing, the rituals, the things you say and do. And I, knowing, okay, this is a sacred thing, a holy thing, it's godly, right? It's not earthly. Don't expect it to be a normal thing at all. I had set myself up for that. And so being in the temple, I'm just constantly reminding myself, it's heavenly, it's godly, it's not earthly. My puny mortal brain can't comprehend this. You know, I just tried to always look for the spirit in it all and the good things in it. And so I wouldn't let myself be uncomfortable with any of it. But then, of course, once I allowed myself to kind of take off those rose-colored glasses and truly look at it, I'm like, how did I not see? I mean, just take the weirdness out of it. Okay, you're wearing goofy clothes, but like handshake, chanting, just a lot of things that, you know, I'm not going to be disrespectful of the temple more than I already have been, I guess. But I just feel like I had finally allowed myself to think truly instead of forcing my brain to fit into the Mormon view. I was actually thinking for myself and looking at it with clear, open eyes. And it just kind of all came crumbling down, starting with when I realized the temple is not the safe, holy, sacred, pure place that I thought it was. Yeah, then there's absolutely no reason for me to be a part of this. Because the thing that most members hold on to with their faith is the fact that they'll get to be with their family forever in heaven. But if the temple is not of God, if those covenants you make there aren't real, although they meant something to me, making those promises, you know, realizing that I don't think those are actually going to be upheld between me and God, because I don't think there's actually any priesthood authority there. And I don't think that God's really probably involved in that temple ceremony. Then there's nothing holding me hostage there anymore. I don't have to worry about, I have to stay here for my eternal family. Like, that fear then was gone. I didn't have to worry about sticking through, enduring to the end to have my eternal family. You know what I mean?
Did you go through right before you got married, or what were the circumstances? Because a lot of people go through at a pivotal time where there's really no way to back out. You know, either you're getting married in a few days, you're leaving on a mission in a few days. I mean, even if you are uncomfortable and disturbed at the beginning, there's no way you can back out, because it's the next step leading to many more steps. So tell us about, how did you go through for the first time?
Well, not only, like you said, there's something important happening shortly after that, but
Right.
you don't even know that you want to back out, because your chance to back out is in the beginning before any of this stuff happens.
Right.
So I had been inactive for like 8 months to a year-ish. At the end of my time at BYU, I kind of started going inactive while I was at BYU. And then a series of events led me back to the church, led me to the bishop's office to repent. And I had a formal disciplinary council, and I was put on a 6-month probation. So while I was actually right at that time that I had my disciplinary council is when I had met my ex-husband and got engaged. And, you know, we wanted to get married in the temple. So my bishop said, you have 6 months, you know, be good, don't screw it up. You gotta go however long without the sacrament. I had to meet weekly with someone from the bishopric. I had to do all these things during my probation. And one of those things included going to the temple prep class, because at the end of my probation, the goal was to, you know, get married in the temple. So I'd been learning about the temple, doing everything I could to try to earn a temple recommend and be worthy. So finally, that 6-month probation ended like September 27th or something, I think it was. And I had to go through the temple recommend process. And it was so emotional to get the recommend from my bishop. But then obviously for your endowment, your stake president has to sign off on it as well. And when I met with the stake president, he said to me, well, if I had known that this is everything you had done and you were on probation for all these things, I wouldn't have given you a recommend after 6 months. You would have had to wait a year. But he said since the bishop signed off on it, he would sign off on it. So I was just, again, so grateful, miraculous. I got this temple recommend. I was deemed worthy. And I went through for my endowment on October 9th. And then exactly 1 week later on October 16th was my sealing. So I had a week between the endowment and the sealing. And I felt like I had really prepared. I mean, those whole 6 months, my mind was just set on the temple, getting there, being worthy, learning about it, being prepared for it in every way that I could be. I mean, as much as you can learn without reading things you shouldn't read, you know?
So you at the time, did you feel like the temple ceremony was a good thing? You enjoyed it? Were you glad that you did it? How did you respond to it then?
Yeah, like I said, I was constantly convincing myself, this is godly, this is holy, this is sacred, this is not of this earth. You worked so hard to be here. This is good. I mean, I didn't, other than feeling kind of dumb, because obviously I don't know the things I'm supposed to be repeating. I don't know the movements I'm supposed to be doing, the putting on the clothes. Like I always got the robe mixed up. Do I tie it on this side? Do I tie it on that side? Which shoulder does it go over? You know, little things like that kind of make you feel stupid. But man, when you walk into that celestial room and everyone who has been cheering you on over the past 6 months, rooting for you to make it there, and they're all there waiting for you, and you just imagine this is what it's going to be like when I get to the celestial kingdom.
Yeah.
Especially for me, I do not have, because I wasn't raised in the church, I don't have family that I'm sealed to. I'm not sealed to anyone. So to be there then and imagine getting to the celestial kingdom with loved ones there waiting for me, that's all I could want. And it was very moving, very emotional for all of us involved. So it was a great thing. I thought it was beautiful. I loved it. But then I look back with a different perspective now.
Okay. Well, fascinating. So, okay. So it's fascinating because, of course, you said it was the temple that kind of did it for you. And thank you for sharing your journey through the temple in many ways, in more ways than one. And that was what kind of then served as the catalyst that would
I do
eventually.
have to add one thing about that.
Oh, sure.
I was so passionate about the temple, and because of how important the temple is, I felt like that was something I really wanted to help people be prepared for. So I made like temple prep videos on my YouTube channel. I broke it down. I showed as many pictures as I could. I gave as much detail as I could. I read through everything there was from a faithful perspective to read about, to prepare people, because I loved the temple so much. I loved garments, you know. We'll get into this later, but one of the things that people think often when they see people leaving Mormonism is like, well, they just wanted to sin, or especially for women, she just didn't want to wear her garments anymore. It was not about that at all. I loved my garments. I felt so cute in my garments. I loved wearing them. And I always was a big advocate for them. In fact, I was quite judgmental of people who didn't wear their garments. So I really was such an advocate, and I tried to do a lot of work for good on my YouTube channel to share about the temple and like help people to be comfortable with it and to want to go there. So it is really ironic that the temple is the thing that brought me down, left me out of Mormonism, I guess.
Fascinating. Yeah. Well, that was the major tether. And once that was broken for you, you could walk away. In a sense, it was easier for you to walk away because you were untethered from the temple. That was kind of the one last final thing. And I can understand why that would be part of the deconversion process, which for everybody is different. Everybody has a different journey. We're all on different journeys. And of course, yours was converting and falling out and then coming back and then leaving and having this and then just not long after you announced to your family is going on Mormon Stories and then announcing it to the world, of course, going on your YouTube channel and announcing it to the world as well. What was that like?
Yeah, that was a big deal. So like I said, when I kind of announced it to my in-law family, it led to even more trouble in my marriage because they were kind of putting pressure on him. And he told me straight up, like, I'm not in this for the long haul. This isn't what I signed up for. I wanted a faithful person. I thought you had a testimony in the Book of Mormon. So you know, the talk of kind of splitting up was on the table, but we both had spiritual experiences where we felt like, no, we're meant to be together. So it was something that wasn't talked about that often. It would get brought up in fights, you know, we'd have these big explosive fights about it. And I'm like, well, then get divorce papers, you know? But for the most part, I was just kind of going about my thing. I stopped wearing garments. I was reaching out to my friend Allison, you know, our friend Allison, which is a miracle in and of itself, because she had been a longtime follower of mine, a viewer of my YouTube stuff. And as crazy as it is, that April 1st, when I posted about, I'm on a great and spacious building, she commented on it. And I cannot tell you what it was, because I didn't know her. She lives in Utah. I live in Arizona. For some reason, I clicked on her name and I messaged her and I was like, you know a lot about religions, right? Can I talk to you? And she was such a big help for me to like, even just have someone to think out loud with, you know, like word vomit almost, whatever the stuff is in your brain, just to kind of dump it out there, have someone, a safe place to process it all with. So she actually helped me with researching other churches to go to, because once I decided I wasn't going to go to Mormon church anymore, I did want to find somewhere else to go. So that was something that was on my mind, but this all happened very, very quickly. So let me think of the timeline here. So that was all in the month of April of coming out to like the in-law family. I talked to my family about it. And luckily for me, because my dad and stepmom are not members of the church, they were just overjoyed. Like, she's seen the light. You know, we all from the outside could tell this was crazy. And you were so obsessed with it. And, you know, it was just like very freeing and kind of connecting for me to almost come back to normalcy from their perspective. I was in this crazy wrapped up Mormon bubble, and now I was like kind of coming back to reality. So that was good. But then by like the first week of May, by Mother's Day, my ex and I had decided to separate, because, I mean, for various reasons, but ultimately, you know, we had different things we wanted in life now. And we both felt like we were holding each other back. So I said, you know, go be free. And maybe some time apart, we'll figure out if we actually can make it work or not. So he moved out. I went to a non-denominational church for the first time, and it was my first Sunday ever taking my kids to church by myself. And it was amazing. It was so, it was like the start of my life. It felt like I am free to decide what I want to do with my Sundays, where I want to go to church. We went and got bagels afterwards, and I was like, I've never bought anything on a Sunday. This is crazy. Like, I'm going out to breakfast on a Sunday. And it was just exciting to feel like I get to decide what I want to wear, where I want to go to church, how I want to raise my kids, what I want to do with my life now. Like, this whole time I just been following this Mormon agenda, right? Everything I can do to be a good Mormon and follow the path that you're kind of supposed to take. So after that, I got a message from John DeLynn asking if I would want to talk to him and maybe go on Mormon Stories. And I think the reason why he knew to reach out to me, I believe, is because Jonathan Streeter saw a YouTube video I made about what not to say to someone going through a faith crisis. And that video came out of left field, because if you look at my YouTube videos, it's like Mormonism, 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 Mormonism. What? Faith crisis? Like, it made no sense. But
no, I can speak to that, because I discovered you literally weeks before you put that video out. So I was watching some of your stuff, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, what's this one? This is quite the departure. So yeah, it was boom and then boom.
yeah.
But that was a good one. That was a really good one, because as a post-Mormon, I totally relate. You know, there is a way to talk and there's a way not to talk. And of course you can't expect someone to know that, but you were definitely helpful and insightful in what you were saying in your video. I thought really good.
And the only reason why I could give perspective on that is because being so faithful, I saw people leaving. I saw people becoming nuanced and kind of like making their own doctrine, so to speak. And I was like, well, that's not what the prophet teaches, and that's not what the scriptures say. And there were people close to me who had left, and I made all the assumptions that they just want to sin, or they're reading anti-Mormon literature, which truly I had no idea what that meant. I thought anti-Mormon literature was people just making fun of Mormons, right? Like people making fun of the temple, people making fun of garments. My brother actually lived in Utah for a while when he was in the Air Force, and he knew about Mormons, and he called garments angel skins. So like, I thought it was probably stuff like that, like people who
Never
just make
heard
fun
that.
of the church. Right? So weird. I don't know where he got that.
I've never heard that, and I've heard a lot. So that's interesting. Wow.
I know, magic underwear, but angel skins. So that's what I assumed anti-Mormon literature was. I didn't know that it was actually just like historical facts. So I just felt like, because I knew what it was like to witness people leaving the church, and then to be the one going through it myself and dealing with, my husband and my husband's family and friends, and being someone who has a platform. Like, I, over the years with my YouTube channel, had dozens and dozens of people tell me they came back to the church because of me. They got baptized because of me. And so now, publicly, for the world to see, all these people who I've influenced are now seeing me make a switch, and they had something to say about it, obviously. So there was just a lot of feedback I was getting. And so that's why I made that video about what not to say. And I started the video off being like, I cannot believe I'm making this video right now. Like, it was so surreal to be such a faithful, apologetic person and then make a different type of video.
Well,
and that was what got me to Mormon Stories, I guess, because it was
yeah.
kind of a big deal.
No, I do recall some of this because I remember Allison telling me this story. And props to Allison, a mutual friend of ours. Really, she's been a great benefit, a great friend to all of us, and we do appreciate you very much, Allison. Of course, she's been a guest on my program. But I want to know, what was it like when you posted that video? What kind of comments were you getting? What was it? Overwhelmingly positive, negative, 50-50? What was it like?
So surprisingly, I got so many messages from Christians being like, Haleigh, I have prayed for you for years that you would come closer to the real Jesus. And I'm so happy for you. Like, people were so proud of me and cheering me on. I had some people ask me, like, what's your address? I'm going to send you some Bible study books. I'm going to send you a journal. I'm going to send you blah, blah, blah. Things just to support me and help me through that journey. And that was amazing to know that people who aren't Mormon have been watching my YouTube videos, kind of following along with my life for years, just rooting for me, even though they didn't agree with me, even though from their perspective, I was in the wrong religion, they were still like rooting me on, like, I was very touched by that. But then of course there were the faithful people who were like, why would you be posting this stuff? How could you do this? Like, you were so strong. I don't understand. Why do you need to share this? If you're going to leave, like, just leave. Like, just be quiet about it. Why do you need to talk about it? Like, are you trying to bring others down? Are you trying to get other people to leave too? And that's not it at all. But from the outside, I 100% understand why it looks that way, because to them, it's scary. And in Mormonism, you're taught, to rely on your feelings a lot, and anything that doesn't feel good must be from Satan. So when you see someone who was once so faithful and strong, and then they like go off the deep end and are singing another tune, that creates a lot of that fear and that kind of yucky feeling. And you're like, this must be Satan. Satan's got a grasp on her. Like, something really bad is happening here. And they just are like, I can't follow you. I can't watch your stuff. I can't see what you're posting. Like, I don't want any part of it. And to be honest, I did that same thing. I would see girls who would stop wearing their garments and start getting lots of ear piercings and stuff and start drinking coffee. And I was like, what are they doing? Like, I don't want to follow someone who's not going to be like a strong example in my life or something. So I get it. But that was hard because they just don't understand when you discover something that almost felt like it was hidden, kept from you, that literally would have changed the trajectory of my life if I had known it. Like, it's so hard to just not say anything, right? Like, your world just got flipped upside down. How are you not supposed to talk about it? And it was just a big deal, you know? Like, I can't just, for someone who puts a lot of my life on the internet, how would I not share this huge thing that was happening with me, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Were
Rebecca?
your in-laws reacting the same way? Same as the comments? What were they saying to you?
So this is one of the things that was very difficult. I wonder if I can pull it up. I had actually sent my in-laws a message because, like I said, they had texted their son / brother, and kind of put pressure on him, but never said anything to me. Not one person called me. These are supposed to be my family now, right? All my family lives in New York. These have been my you know, siblings and parents for the past 6 years. And if they're so concerned about me, if they love me, why aren't they saying anything to me? Nothing to my face. I did not get a single phone call or text. The only thing I eventually got was my, at the time, sister-in-law sent me a YouTube video she saw about someone who converted to the church. And she felt like, I hope this woman sharing her testimony will help you. I'm like, thanks. So I did send them a message, and I have it here. I'll just maybe read like the beginning of it. I said, if you all have concerns with me and the church, maybe you should talk to me and try to answer my questions and be helpful. Assuming I'm on anti-websites is just insulting. Threatening my eternal salvation and family is plain mean. And asking my husband if I'm doing this so he'll divorce me, telling him he needs to make a decision about what he'll do if he's going to leave me, that's super Christ-like. Great way to teach unconditional love and kindness and endure to the end. That's a hard line you just crossed. It's disgusting and cruel. How absolutely sickening and painful that you would be so quick to turn your back on someone who is your family for having questions or doubts about your religion. It was a really long message. I don't know if I should read the whole thing, but I just said, you can count me out of this family since I'm so easily dismissed when I don't believe the same things you do. And then I left that group chat, and literally no one reached out to me. Except for that one YouTube video my sister-in-law sent me saying, I hope this helps you.
Well, I do want to ask.
Which again, great intentions, but that was extremely hurtful. So that's just not what you do. If you really love someone, or if you're concerned for them, or, like, you don't just talk behind their back and not actually be there for them or help them. Or like, if you're curious, if you have assumptions, then just ask, like, text me, call me and say, tell me what's going on. Like, where did this all start?
Well,
But I got
there's sort of an assumption that you're dangerous now. If they were to talk to you, you might say something that they don't want to hear. Do you know what I mean? There's sort of that idea that maybe don't get too close, maybe back away a little bit, because now you have so many different thoughts and perspectives, and you have studied some things, and some things they just don't want to hear. I think that's a legitimate way to look at it, sort of.
And no one wants to fight. Like the little back and forth we had on Easter during the general conference, when I was saying, well, how do you know this or that? Like, I was given some good pushback, I'm not gonna lie. And who wants to go back and forth with a battle? Like, we're obviously not going to agree, So I get it. But you could at least say, like, I'm here for you. I love you no matter what. I'm sorry you're going through this. Whatever. Like, but I got nothing. So, yeah.
I have to say that this is instructive because, of course, I became an atheist and experienced similar things. This is not just unique to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. A lot of people, when they leave high demand religions, often, and my branch of evangelical Christianity could certainly be viewed as a high demand religion that I was in at the time. So that I had a similar experience. So I think this can be instructive to everybody in the audience. Because like I tell people, I say, when I became an atheist, a lot of people didn't realize that I had just lost my best friend. And your best friend was God, or your best friend was the church. And so the rug was pulled out from under you. So you're kind of in a grieving process as well. And very few people I ever talked to that lost their faith say, I did it because I wanted to sin. Matter of fact, when I had Aaron Ra, one of the biggest atheists on YouTube, come on my program, he said, Steve, if I wanted to sin, I'd become a Christian, which I thought that was a great line because he kind of turned it on its head. And because he was
That is a
raised
good
in the
line.
Bible Belt where it was once saved, always saved. You're like, hey, that's a free pass, and I thought, yeah, that's valid. That's valid. So I do think that we all need to be sensitive. And I want to talk to everybody here, because a lot of people had explanations as to why I became an atheist, but they never asked me. So it was a similar thing. So I think it's really important, wherever you're at, whether you're a Christian, evangelical, atheist, all that we have these conversations, because as we're living in a world that's becoming increasingly secular, and there's a growth in the nuns and the atheists and the agnostics, that we have to engage them in a way that's it's a two-way street. And the most important thing for those of you who are believers, the most important thing is, are you exhibiting the love of Christ when you're engaging these people? And just say, and really literally, what would Jesus do in a circumstance? Jesus would definitely engage the atheist, the person who's having the faith crisis, and say, tell me your story. Why are you hurting? And what can we do to bring healing to this process? I think that's, as individuals, wherever we're at, that's the approach we should be taking.
I love what you said there about what can I do to like help you with your healing? Not how can I reel you back in and bring you back? It's I'm here for you. I want to help you with whatever it is that you need, right? It's not about what I need. I need you to come back to the church. I need you to be faithful and, stay on the straight and narrow. Like, oh, it's so heartbreaking. And I feel so sad for everyone who's had to experience this, like you said, in any facet of their life, wherever they're at, feeling not only did you just lose something, but then you've been abandoned. It's extremely painful.
It reminds me of a conversation I had just the other day with a friend of mine who was an ex-Jehovah's Witness, and he's had 2 overdoses in the last 2 years. His brother works at the Jehovah's Witness church headquarters in upstate New York. And it took him to be in a coma for 10 days for his brother to be able to get permission to leave church headquarters. He was a Bethelite, as they call him, and go down to stay at his brother's hotel. And finally, his brother went to him and said, you know what? I don't care anymore, as long as you're happy, man. But he said, Steve, it took me to be in a coma for 10 days for him to at least acknowledge that maybe coming back into the church isn't going to happen, but you need to be happy. He said, I wish it didn't have to be me being in a coma for 10 days for him to have that realization. So we all have these blinders, and it's really important, because literally my buddy is still trying to get his life back together. And he's a really close friend of mine that I've reconnected with. And this is real, folks. My buddy almost died. I have another one got beat to death with a drug deal that went bad. These are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses I used to hang out with. So I think that's where the stakes are high, because there's lives that could be at risk here. And so we really need to look at it in the here and now too. Like, hey, maybe I don't agree with them. Maybe I think that they're wrong, but I don't want them to die. I don't want them to overdose. So we also have to be aware that when people often have these loss of faith, that they suffer mental depression and substance abuse. And it's so important as Christians, as believers, as people of faith, to Christ would be right there by that side with my buddy when he was having the OD. He would be there, and we need to be there. We need to be there before that happens as well.
I have one more thing to say about that. So like I said, I consumed a lot of content. I watched, I actually just watched this very recently. I watched Radio Free Mormon debating with Kwaku. And in their debate, Kwaku said, RFM, you put out all this information that makes people leave the church, but then you're not there for them. You offer them nothing. Like, what, you need to be your brother's keeper. You do nothing for them. They leave the church and now they've lost everything and their lives are a mess, and you're not accountable for it. You're not responsible for it. The families and loved ones of those people are the ones who are responsible to care after them. Like, for me, if I read the CES letter and that makes me leave the church, is it Jeremy, who wrote the CEF letter, is that his responsibility to then help me? No. If you are going through something in your life, in your faith transition, it is your faithful friends and family's obligation to still love you and hold you and help you through your grieving, through your change. It's not the internet's responsibility to be there for you, or wherever you found the information. That's their job. You know what I mean? Like, they're the ones who love you, who know you, who interact with you on a regular basis. And it doesn't matter where you got the information. It's not like, okay, well, I'm leaving you guys. Now I'm going to go be, you know, some secular person. So now it's up to my new secular friends to take care of me. Like, no, usually you're starting from scratch and you have nothing and no one. Hopefully your faithful friends and family will still be there for you. And too often they're not. And they're the ones who are supposed to be.
That's such a funny argument, I think. And I would say that if anybody reached out to RFM, I'm sure that he would talk to them because he's awesome. But I feel like in some ways, when you step away from the church, your family, it's almost like a tough love scenario. Like you are now not going to be with them in the next life, right? Which is devastating to them. And so I almost feel like in some ways they're like, well, if I distance myself, I can sort of draw them back in for their own good, if that makes a little bit of sense. I've told this story before where I had a fiance at BYU who went into the MTC and a few weeks later decided he just didn't want to do it. And his family disowned him. They called me and asked me to disown him and have nothing to do with him. Of course I didn't do it, but their idea was this will bring him back. This will help him see the light. We just have to kind of withhold for their eternal good. It's a strange way of thinking, but I think that might play into it too, that they just don't know what to do. And they're so concerned because in their mind, they've lost you forever. Have you ever thought of that point of view?
Yeah. And unfortunately, like my ex-mother-in-law, I think maybe it's a generational thing where they put so much emphasis on their church leadership, especially that if they go to a bishop or a stake president and they give them advice, like stay away from that person, you need to let them figure this out. You need to give them some tough love, or like you said, the idea maybe that person's dangerous now. They take that advice and they think that like, oh, this is, my leader who's called of God. So this isn't their inspired counsel and I need to do that. And that's also, in fact, worse in my opinion, because they can't decide for themselves out of their own love for your relationship, that they're then just going to listen to someone else about what to do. Like, if they really love you, So I agree. Wherever they get it from, whether it's their own idea or, their bishop or someone gave that advice. Yeah, that's not the Christ-like, that's not the loving thing to do, even though they might think it is, I guess.
Well, and this is the most fascinating thing about you. What makes you so unique is that a lot of people, and maybe it's because you were raised Catholic and you were a convert or whatever, but often what frequently happens is that when somebody leaves the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they throw the baby out with the bathwater, and they decide they don't want to have anything to do with God, Jesus, the Bible, Christianity. They just skip that step and go head right into atheism. Why is it that you still clung on to Jesus and Christianity?
Oh, so many reasons. The very first one was because I have it on display here too. Lynn Wilder's book, Unveiling Grace. That was one of the things that really helped me to realize what I have been programmed to believe was from God and Jesus does not line up with the Bible. Mormons, use the Bible. They believe in Jesus and the atonement, but I really was recognizing the discrepancy between the two. And so then once I realized Mormonism is not what I thought it was, and that it seemed to me they weren't actually following Jesus. Like, I don't actually think Jesus is behind the restoration. So then my next thing was, okay, I need to find out what Jesus actually said. What did Jesus actually teach? So I was like studying the Bible every night. I had the King James Version, the New International Version, the English Standard Version. I'm just like comparing all these things, reading historical context, like digging into like, okay, what is the Bible actually saying? Throw away all the Mormon, background in my head that I thought I knew what the Bible taught. Let's look at it with clean, fresh eyes. And I wanted to try a church because I felt like it was important. I can't just, if I'm on kind of a quest for truth, I can't just drop the thing that I know is wrong and then therefore say everything's wrong. So that's when I went to Christian church and I was studying the Bible. And I will be honest, I know a lot of people when they leave Mormonism, they are like, okay, now take all of the, learning and the process that I used to deconstruct the Book of Mormon and Mormonism, and let's do that with Christianity and the Bible. That is not something I wanted to do. I have gotten into it a little bit now because I feel more secure and stable. I was very self-aware at the time. I knew that there was too much going on for me to go right into that. I'm not about to look into the historicity of the Bible and all that. I couldn't do that at the time. So I have gotten into that a little bit more now, which has influenced my beliefs to a certain extent. But and this is going to sound very Mormon of me, but I couldn't abandon Christianity because through all of that with my faith journey, and then I went on Mormon Stories, and then my marriage was over. I was going through divorce papers right when I got back after doing Mormon Stories, and my life literally falling apart, right? I felt so, the thing that I kept repeating over and over to myself was like, you are in the palm of my hands. Like, I knew God's got me. And that's a feeling thing, right? We're not supposed to rely on our feelings, but I felt cared for. I felt safe. As crazy as everything was that was going on and hard, I felt very peaceful as well. And I have a lot of videos that I would post like at 1 a.m. crying on my Instagram, being like, I don't know why this is happening all at the same time. I'm going through divorce papers. I'm, alone. I've left my religion. I've lost, friends and family and my husband, and this idea of an eternal family. And now I'm a single mom and all this stuff. I'm going through this horrible heartache. And I know I'm going to be okay. And I feel peaceful. Like, it was the craziest complex set of emotions, but I felt very taken care of. Like, God really is in the details. More and more, I realized how little things had been happening to me over the past year to bring me to that point where I was able to let go of Mormonism. It wasn't this thing that I took years to deconstruct and still cling on to it. I was okay with letting it go. And I think there had been several things, like I said, that prepared me. And I felt like it was all God, helping me in little ways to be more strong and confident in myself instead of needing the temple, needing the church, needing my husband. I was okay myself individually because I knew he had me. I knew he was in control. He was helping me to be strong, confident, to find more about him and / Jesus, looking at it from a Trinity point of view. It was just a feeling. I don't know how to describe it. Just like the things that had happened, the way that I felt, to me, it was God.
I see that. I get that. I understand it too, because Pete, you can't fake peacefulness. Either you're at peace or you're not. Either you're in the waters and you're swimming or you're drowning, and you can't fake it. It's so if you have that peace that surpasseth all understanding, which I understand because I have had similar experiences, it's really a good place to be. And I'm so glad to hear that you were in the storm and you were able to swim and not drown because you felt he was guiding you and that he had you in his hands. And it's a beautiful way to look at it.
Yeah, and I'm very lucky, I will say, because I know a lot of people don't have that, and they do. Like your friend who's dealing with some, substance abuse and stuff. It's a depressing time. It's a hard time. People don't know where to turn for comfort, and I just clung to Jesus. I did everything I could to put myself close to him. I got a tattoo of a cross that says faith. I started wearing a cross necklace. I was nonstop listening to Christian music and Christian podcasts and reading the Bible and just doing everything I could. That was the one thing that I felt like, there's some Mormon hymn that says like, in this, there's safety and peace. I can't remember what hymn that is.
It's a
but
primary song, I think, Keep the Commandments.
yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's it. And funny enough, that's how I felt about where I was in my place out of Mormonism. There was safety and peace there.
Ironically.
Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating because, of course, I want us to talk about your adventures, your journey in the evangelical landscape. And on Rebecca, I kind of want you to chime in on this too, because of course you've kind of had similar forays, checking out different churches with your husband, and even going to Joel Osteen's church and things like that. I just find it very interesting to hear the perspective of somebody as an outsider, like Haleigh, you've entered into my world, and I kind of want to know what it's like from your perspective, and I want Rebecca to kind of chime in on that as well.
Yeah, I want to hear your perspective, Rebecca.
Well, the first thing I think is it's a very interesting concept that you can choose where you go, because when you're raised LDS, and I was born LDS, you go where your boundaries are. You don't ever think about, that there would ever be a choice if your ward wasn't quite working for you. I have friends that have moved because their ward was not working. They moved. So, and when I'm 13 and they split the ward and my best friend is taken somewhere else, and we can't be together like we were, you don't think twice about that. You don't realize that everyone else in a religious tradition does not live like that. You find a church that works for you. You attend. You try it on for size. If it's not for you, you go to the church, a different church the next day. That is such a foreign concept, I think, to Mormons. So while I was still in the church with my husband, he was really the driving force. He loves to sing. He loves the music, which I know you do too from listening to your videos. And so he was very attracted to all different kinds of Christian music. So we would go to our regular ward. I was doing my primary pianist calling, which is why I knew that song right away. And he'd go, no, we're leaving this, we're after the 3-hour block and we're going to go to this church or that church. So we literally did probably 6 hours of church every Sunday. But the experience of walking into a different kind of setting, there's a coffee bar, there's a tea bar, there's music, there's lyrics on the screen, there's maybe a band, there's friendly people. It was just so different, like night and day. So we did that for quite a while. We went to all different kinds of churches. We especially appreciated sermons by paid clergy, educated clergy, who know their scriptures. I mean, my husband and I would come away just talking nonstop in the car about, oh my, I had not heard that Bible story, or I never thought of it that way. So it was absolutely fascinating to us and we loved it. So I would love to hear more about first of all, your realization that I can choose for me and my family, because it's not just you. Now it's you and your husband and your kids, and you're trying to find a place to plant yourself, on your faith journey. So I would love to hear how you felt realizing that, oh my gosh, the ecclesiastical world is my oyster, right? And then kind of the criteria. I think you described to us once that maybe you even made a list, like what's important, what do you want? You kind of see what you didn't get here. What do you want? So I'd love to hear all about that from you.
Okay, I can tell Steve's excited.
He's like, yes.
So there are like two different parts to this, because there was me at the time as a single mom finding a church that worked for me. And then there's me now, a married mom, with my husband now, which I'll get into after. So luckily my friend Allison had knowing Christianity well and knowing Mormonism well, she vetted out a lot of churches for me. I gave her my address and told her, look within the area. So she's all doing this virtually. She lives in Utah. So coincidentally enough, the one that I thought looked right for me was the same one she thought looked right for me. So I went there, and I'm not gonna lie, there are things that I still love about Mormon church that I do miss. As far as, I was just talking to my husband about this morning, actually. Me being a musician and like a singer, I love having sheet music. Like you mentioned, the words being on the screen, that is not enough for me. I want to know the harmony line. Give me the alto line to sing. So I kind of miss that. I actually do like traditional hymns. And I sort of like the idea of talks, because I loved giving talks. And it's a great way to like match people's names with their faces, to know people in your congregation. So that was good. But I like getting dressed up every Sunday. Like a lot of people go to church like kind of in their pajamas with like, they just rolled out of bed and they've got a cup of coffee. I like getting dressed up every Sunday, so I still do that. But yeah, so I went to this church which had a huge cross on the outside, ginormous parking lot. There are people wearing neon shirts, waving you where to go, where to park. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm at a big fancy event or something. And I walk in, there's a big like desk of workers, volunteers offering, you know, help, assistance. Everyone who is a volunteer there is wearing a shirt, and everywhere you go, people are like, hey, welcome, hey, like constantly just smiles, welcomes, very happy. Lots of people walking around, kids, all different ages of people. I'm like, cool. People are just hanging out outside, talking. Like, this looks fun. Everyone's socializing and stuff. So I go in there and I tell them right away, I'm brand new here. I literally just left the Mormon church. What do I do with my kids? Where do I go? And they have a great system of getting kids checked in, where they print off a little sticker that goes on your kid's shirt, and your kid goes to a classroom for their age, which means you just get to worship and learn on your own. There is no sacrament meeting where you are trying to keep kids quiet and give them snacks, and they have to be reverent and keep their arms folded, and you can't even pay attention. Like, it is just all about your opportunity to worship and, you know, hear from the good word. So that was awesome. And knowing my kids were going to a place where they're safe, no one else can take them, you know, it has to be me with their corresponding code that's on their sticker or whatever, and they're going to learn something from the Bible too. So I was excited about that. The church that I went to was pretty large. So it was in this like big auditorium with like stadium seating, and there are lights, it's dark, it's like a concert. So I walk in there and my pastor there was so great. I walk in and, you know, this is hard for me to be out alone. Great that I didn't have kids bugging me, but like I'm standing there the whole time like this. Like, obviously, you know, going through something. But the music touched me. And for the first month, maybe, they were going through this series, which is interesting. They have like themes to their sermons over the course of however many weeks. And the theme that they were doing when I first went was the world upside down or something like that. And it was showing how things in Christianity tend to not make sense sometimes. And I'm trying to remember all the details, but like one of the ideas was that being a Christian doesn't mean you're going to have some happy, easy life. Christians are often very persecuted, and think of Jesus and his persecution and whatnot. And so many, I have notes saved still from those first couple of weeks. But it was like every Sunday, the things that were being talked about were exactly things that I needed to hear. And the songs were with lyrics exactly what I needed to hear. And I'm like, you know, in the Mormon view, when that happens, when you go to church on Sunday and someone gives a talk and it's like exactly what you needed to hear, that's, you know, testimony building, right? That's faith promoting, that this person is inspired. There's truth here. God is involved in this. Well, I had that outside of Mormonism. I found that at a different church. So that was very reassuring to me, that God knew I'm here and I need help, and he is inspiring the pastor, the singers, whatever, to do something that I need. And that was amazing for me. And these people who I didn't even know are more than willing to answer any and all questions, to sit down with me, to hear my story. They asked me, because I went to the like, I'm new here desk. And, you know, just like I said, I just left the Mormon church. I'm going through a divorce. This is my first time here. And they're like giving me all this information about play groups and prayer. Like, if you need prayer, people will pray with you, and just all sorts of things. People are very helpful, supportive. I loved it. I really did. It was very different, obviously. It took some, you know, getting used to, but I loved it. And having like no pressure about, okay, I have to keep the Sabbath day holy, so we're not going to watch TV, and we're only going to listen to this type of music, and we can't, go out, we can't spend money. Like, it was great to feel like this is really my day to decide how I want to be close to the Lord and what I want to do with my kids. And I loved it. And I didn't even go to any other churches at that time because I felt so good about that one. So that was where I stayed. And they all somehow knew me. Like, they were all talking about me, I guess, because the worship pastor was reaching out to me, and his voice was amazing. I'm not gonna lie. Like, the music there was so good. So that was like, I felt like I was at a concert, just like listening to them. And the worship pastor, you could tell, was so genuinely like in love with Jesus. Like, everything that he was singing, you could feel the emotion behind it. And it was very moving, it definitely pulls out your feelings. And I loved that. And I know they were very supportive of me and willing to help me out in whatever way I needed. So much that when the time came for me to get remarried, it was my pastor there who married me and my husband. And it was beautiful. Oh my gosh. My wedding, a Christian wedding, where he and I are making our vows to each other. And my pastor is, saying these wonderful things, like not speaking for God, but I don't know how to word it. He's not trying to like be a mouthpiece for God, but he is saying godly things to us and giving us insight into what it means to be married under the eyes of God. Now, I'm not making covenants in a temple to God that if I don't keep them, then I don't get the blessings. It was just such a different experience. And even the worship pastor came and performed a song during our wedding. Like, they were so invested in my story and in my life. And it meant so much to me because it was 100% genuine. It wasn't a minister who was assigned to me in Mormon church. It wasn't, a bishop who was forced to look over me. This is a huge church. They didn't have to pay attention to me at all. I'm sitting there in this dark auditorium, but they noticed me every Sunday and came up to me and said something. They saw me standing there by myself every week. And I don't know, I really felt loving and Christ-like, and I got something out of it every week. It wasn't boring. It wasn't meaningless. I don't know. It was really a special thing for me.
It's so fascinating hearing your description of what, and it sounds to me like it almost like seemed like it was a perfect fit almost from the beginning. Like, I was going to ask you, like, were you nervous and did you feel uncomfortable with raising hands and clapping and all this? But it sounds to me like you kind of got plugged into that church pretty quickly and seemed to find a church home right away, which does not normally happen. It's usually a transition of, I don't know, this is different.
I did experience that after, because we moved. So we left that church.
So you haven't mentioned that church's name. Do you want to mention it, or would you rather not say?
Yeah. It's in Gilbert. It's called Mission Community Church.
Okay.
And it's amazing. They just got a new lead pastor. So I only was there for maybe like 2 weeks while they had their new pastor. So I'm not sure, how that's going for them right now, but okay. It was great for me. I loved it. As far as the like hands up in the air and the clapping and stuff, whatever people feel compelled to do to worship Jesus and praise him, like, I am all for it. Like, I love seeing people's passion. What was amazing was to like look around and see the people who you could tell like this sermon was hitting them. They were very prayerful about it, were tearful even, and people had their notes out, their Bibles out, and I don't know, it was very heartwarming to see people truly like wanting to know Jesus. They're there simply because they want to be close to Jesus, not because their whole family is there and it's a cultural thing and they have to be there to take the sacrament. There wasn't communion or sacrament every week or anything. It wasn't some obligation, like I have to be here so I can be worthy and blah, blah, blah. Like, those people are there because they want to be there. People who are, whether they're in pajamas, whether they're dressed up, whether they're full of tattoos and piercings, come one, come all. And the missions, that's the name of the church, Mission, they're like slogan, I guess, it's all over, is Jesus changes everything. And you can truly see that there, that like, doesn't matter who you are, where you've been, what you've done, like there's a spot for you at the table. Jesus changes everything. And everything that they stood for is what I needed at that time. I will say I look for something a little bit different now, which is why I'm at the church where I'm at now, thankfully. But at that time, Mission is very a feel-good church. It is like a motivational speech. I wouldn't say it's as much intensive like Bible study. You know, there are scriptures and scriptural stories to support what the theme is, but it's much more about like, Jesus loves you. There's a place for you at his table. Come as you are. Grace is available. Just makes you feel good. But I personally like to feast a little bit more on the word and get into the nitty gritty.
Okay.
So that was one of the things. Then, like I said, I got married. So when my husband, now husband, when we knew we were going to be moving, we moved an hour away. So we stayed going to that church every week. And I'll just pause a little bit to talk about the idea of marrying someone who has never been Mormon, but in fact came from a very different background of being Orthodox. I don't even know what the technical term is for, and he gave me permission. He told me I could say anything I wanted to say about his story. It's like okay, this is what the church that he went to is called the St. George Antiochian Orthodox Church. So my husband's Armenian, so I think that there are a lot of Armenians who go there. So that's my thought about why he went there. And I mean, you can just see, I don't know if you can tell in that picture, it's very different than a Mormon church. It reminds me a lot of kind of a Catholic church. There are a lot of stained glass windows and pictures of saints and stuff. Very different.
Yeah, it comes from very different. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So me being raised Catholic, because my mother, it's from Ireland, her whole family is from Ireland, so very Irish Catholic. And then actually, coincidentally, my dad and stepmom are the musicians at a Catholic church. So they perform every week at, their Catholic church's services. So that's something that has been a part of my life, my whole life, is Catholicism. And I'm very familiar with all sorts of different Catholic churches and what they believe a little bit. And I actually went through the whole First Communion, catechism, that whole ceremony thing. And then I converted to Mormonism. So I, didn't really have much to do with Catholicism after that. But when my husband and I were dating, we agreed to do every other week at his church and then my church, because my husband had gone through his own kind of soul searching, come to Jesus stuff. And he was very emotionally invested in his church because he was very close with his priest, and the church, his priest, did a lot for him. That's one of the things that I felt in Mormonism as well. When your bishop gives you that temple recommend and helps you through a repentance process, like you're very tied to it. So, I was more than willing to go to his church. I felt like that was only fair. I don't want to be mean. We got into a big fight that first Sunday because unfortunately I'm a very blunt, honest person, and I cannot tell a lie, and my body language tells it all. So I was very uncomfortable there. And coming out of Mormonism, I just had a very clear idea of what I liked, what I didn't like, what I thought was true, what I thought was, man-made. And I couldn't help but notice a lot of similarities in his church to the temple, actually, as far as lots of rituals, lots of things are symbolism, symbolic. Clothing is symbolic. A lot of things are very showy, is what I call it. And so this church was very important to him. And I had my ideas, which were very important to me. So then we had to, compromise, and any married couple does. I don't know if you experienced this, Rebecca, but even getting married when you're both Mormon, you come from different families with maybe different ways of spending your Sundays or different ways of viewing things. So
Yeah, no, I get that. First Sunday, big fight, because I was raised with no TV, very orthodoxly. My husband was from California. So we come home from church on Sunday as a married couple, and he turns on the TV. And I'm like, what? What? We had never talked about that. But to me, that was a sin next to murder, practically, So he eventually converted me because I saw the benefit of TV on Sunday. But yeah, just those little things that we looked at each other and said, who are you? I mean, you just don't know. So I totally understand that. Yeah, I think a lot of couples go through that.
yeah, so even in Mormonism, it's a thing. And man, we had a lot of discussions like infant baptism, because that's a huge cultural thing for them. Like, even if you don't go to church every week, you still get your baby baptized. And I don't believe in that. The transubstantiation, is that how you say it?
Yeah,
Where
that's close enough. Yeah, that's more of a Catholic term, but they have a very similar view in the real presence in the host and in the wine. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So that was the thing. And I had to, be very careful talking to my, at the time, boyfriend and then fiance, because I'm not trying to tell him what's right or wrong. I'm just trying to tell him what I believe and why. And so we spent a lot of time, and by we, I mean mostly me, researching the Bible and what does it say. And I had to deconstruct a lot of things, even still, like, okay, what does this really mean? And where does this come from? And so there were a lot of things for us to figure out. And it was really important to him to get married in that church. He thought it was a beautiful church, and he had always imagined himself getting married there. So we met with his priest. And I would have had to jump through so many hoops to get married there. I would have had to do some sort of, not get baptized, but I don't even know what it's called. I would have had to take some sort of class to become some sort of like member. I would have had to write a letter to a higher up person pleading my case that I am no longer Mormon and pleading the reasons why I got divorced, so that they would give me approval to even become a member of their church. And there was a chance that could be denied. And I believe the priest told us that we would have to, again, wait like at least 6 months, if not a year.
That sounds too familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah. Like, okay, so I need the priest approval. I need the higher up. What is that? Stake president? No, it's I don't know, a bishop. I don't know what it is. Too many people's approval, too many timelines for waiting. I'm like, I'm not okay with this. Like, I don't need anyone to tell me what I am worthy or deserving of or not. I don't need to plead my case with anyone. Jesus is the one who pleads my case for me with God. He's the only one in between me and God. No one else, no man. So going through that, I think also kind of opened my husband's eyes to some things that he realized, yeah, I don't entirely agree with that as well. And man, lots and lots of discussions. I even one time, like, we had a conversation and I was like, I don't want to be rude, but I'm really not comfortable going back there again. And I just want to know why you love that church so much. Like, is it just the priest? Like, if he wasn't there, would you still want to go to that church? And he realized, like, no, actually, it's more the priest that I'm tied to personally. And so he was like, what are your issues? So I made this whole long list and we had this really long discussion about it. And it's hard stuff to work through because I'm not the like end all be all. I don't know for certain what's right or wrong. If anything, leaving Mormonism, that was one of the great things, is realizing I don't have to say I know. Like, not everything is black and white, right or wrong. I get the freedom to decide what I think and what I feel and believe, but I don't know for certain. And I am free to get it wrong, and that's okay. I will course correct, but my eternal salvation isn't at risk, I don't think. I don't know for certain about most things, but this is based on my experience and my research, what I believe, and this is what's important to me. So we had a lot of difficult conversations, and we agreed, once we knew we were going to be moving far away, that we would find a church that worked for the both of us, which we knew would be hard. But it was really important to us because, like you said, Rebecca, this is where you're planting roots, where you're going to be raising your kids. And in Mormonism, there's kind of this idea that wherever you live is where you're meant to live, like spiritually, because that's the ward you're supposed to be in. And like the callings you get, you're supposed to be there for those callings and stuff. The great thing now is I get to decide where I want to go. If I'm willing to drive an hour, I'll drive an hour. It's up to me, and my family, what works for us. And it's a really big deal because this is where we're going to be raising our kids. And I'm not just going to get the luck of the draw with whoever the bishop happens to be or whoever's in the primary presidency at the time, like I'm going to choose the place that I really think is going to be the best fit for us. So that led to the journey of test driving a lot of different churches.
And how did that go? And how many would you say did you visit?
Well, we moved here at the end of October. So it's only been November, December, like 3.5 months. We probably went to like 6 different churches, I think. I did a lot of research online. I posted in a Facebook group saying, I come from a Mormon background. I'm looking for a non-denominational church. Can you give me any recommendations? And a lot of people recommended Catholic Church, Baptist Church, Lutheran Church, several non-denominational churches. And then just from Googling, local non-denominational churches, I went through all these websites, went to their Facebook pages, Instagram pages, their YouTube channels, watched some sermons. Like, I did a lot of online research and in-person research. One was awful. Like, I didn't think this would ever happen, but we left in the middle of church. We were like disgusted. So
What
that was
happened?
horrible.
What was so disgusting about it?
Okay, well, this is just our perspective, and I would never name the church, but we walk in, everyone's friendly. We drop the kids off and they ask, is there anything we need to know, like medications, allergies? And I said, yes, no artificial color or flavor. Yeah, we don't like give our kids candy and artificial sugar crap. So then we go into the service, and there was nothing wrong with the music, but there were people like twirling flags. And I was like, okay, I don't know if this is like a cultural thing. Maybe this is just how they want to worship. And I thought about it from a Mormon perspective of callings. Like, well, even someone has to hand out hymn books or something, right? Like, maybe these people just wanted something to do and this is their way to participate. But it's a little distracting and strange to see all these different colorful flags being waved, but like, whatever. And then the pastor, the whole sermon was like about money. And I felt like he was maybe lying and telling some exaggerating stories about money. And this is going to sound judgmental, but just looking around, there were a lot of obviously lower income people there. And he's sitting here this whole time telling people to give money. And I'm like, this sure sounds a lot like President Nelson telling poor people in Africa to give money, and even if they don't have money to feed themselves, to pay tithing, like we got rubbed very the wrong way. And it wasn't just like, oh, this is lame, because there are sermons about, donating, being generous, whatever, but like everything about what he did gave us the creeps.
Got it. I've been to that church service. I know exactly what you're talking about. Well, I get it.
Yeah, it was very uncomfortable. So then we're like, I can tell my husband's uncomfortable. And I was like, do you want to go? And he goes, yeah, I do. You're feeling the same way? I was like, yeah, I'm not having good thoughts here. So we go to grab our kids, and they're literally scooping out ice cream and hot fudge and giving them like an ice cream sundae. I'm like, what is going on? Like, why are you having an ice cream sundae at church? Like, can you do something maybe about Jesus? I don't know. I understand the snack maybe, but like, why? And we said no artificial stuff. Like, I was really bothered. I felt kind of disrespected by that, and obviously was not a fan of the sermon and stuff. So yeah, we left there. Never went back. There was another church we went to that was more traditional, because that was something my husband and I were both interested in, because honestly, the big rock band stuff with the drums and the electric guitars and all the like lasers, that's not really our thing. So we wanted to find something a little more traditional. So we went to a church that does a cappella music, and unfortunately that wasn't our speed either. That didn't feel like it was going to be a good place for our family. There were no like young people there, and we didn't like get anything out of the sermon. It was very like not lively. And of course my freaking Mormon brain kicked in and was like, maybe this is where we need to be. Maybe we need to bring life to this place. Maybe we need to bring the youth here and whatnot. And I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of sick of living in that Mormon mindset of, I have so much I need to do. I have a work I have to do on this earth. Like, that's what I do with my YouTube channel. I felt like, as difficult as it was, as much hate and criticism as I got, I need to persevere. I need to keep doing this because I have a purpose. I have a mission. I have to, you know, bring people into Christ. And like, I'm kind of in a season of my life right now where, maybe this sounds bad, but like, I want to be receiving something. I always will try to be a Christ-like person and live my life where I'm being a good example, you know, but I don't want it to be my mission to go into a church and feel the pressure. Like, I need to be a big deal here. I need to make some changes happen, or I need to help this church. You know what I mean?
Got it.
So we decided that wasn't the place for us either.
Yeah. So I guess, and then Rebecca, I want you to chime in here too. But what made you land on a church? Because, and I'm glad you're kind of giving like these was it. I don't want to make it sound like you're going to find the first church you walk through. It's going to be the church for you. It sounds to me like you went and like you visited about half dozen different ones. What made you settle on the church that you ended up attending?
So there was another one that we went to a few times that we really liked, but the pastor is not there in person. I think he's like kind of a traveling pastor, the different campuses in the valley. And so you're watching on the screen. And I liked the sermons that we heard. It seemed like it had a great community, would be great for the kids. So I was hopeful about that. I loved their music. Their music was great. It was a little bit more acoustic, less like rock-ish, which I love rock music, just not at church. So the place that I felt very pulled towards that one. I thought that would be a good one. But then we went to this other one that there are a couple of silly, simple things. One of the things that's so silly is it's bright in there. The lights are on. You can see each other's faces. It feels much more interactive. Like, you could be in a big church where it's dark and no one would know you're there. There's so many people. You don't see anyone. You're not making eye contact with anyone in there. And that feels kind of lonely. And I like the community aspect of Mormonism. So I'm looking for that again, you know, especially just moving to an area. We don't know anybody out here. So I like that it was bright. I could see people's faces. The pastor was there in person. We really, so far, really like the pastor. His father was a pastor. He has a lot of knowledge. Like you mentioned, Rebecca, people who actually went to like seminary or got degrees in, I don't know, theology, I guess. I don't know exactly what their degrees are in when they go to Bible school or whatever, but you can tell this dude knows his stuff. And the thing that we like about it so far the most is that you are truly feasting on the word of God. You are diving into the Bible. And I mean, I'm taking so many notes. I'm highlighting so many things. I almost feel like I'm in a Bible study class, but there's always like a take-home message. and something spiritual as well, not just intellectually learning, you know? And the kids' classes seem really good so far. And coincidentally, I went there one week and this girl comes running up to me and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I watched your Mormon stories," which I don't mean to like toot my own horn, but my husband always jokes that he's married to a celebrity because we have been out so many places that people come up to me and recognize me, which is so funny. But so she reached out to me and we were texting, and you know, she shared a little bit of her journey with me, and I was like, "Tell me how long you've been at the church. What do you like about the church? How is it with kids? How's the pastor? Like, give me the inside scoop." And I loved everything she had to say. We talked about feel good churches because I told her about the one I was at before and how it was great for that season of my life, you know, but now I'm kind of looking for something more like meat and potatoes, you know. And she said, "Yes, this church has that. It's so great." I was the one who mentioned the feel good thing. And she was like, "Okay, I'm glad you said that because now I feel comfortable saying it." And I even asked her about the other church, like, "How about this one? Have you ever been there? Do you know anyone who's been there?" And we talked about a couple other churches. And she gave me a lot of reassurance that this was a great place. And she's in a mixed faith marriage. Her husband is still active in the church. So that was really comforting to me. I really like that the pastor is not afraid to, what I would say, lay down the law, but in a Christ-like manner. So, for example, I used to love the family proclamation, and I loved when President Oates would get up there and like be harsh about some of those issues, like LGBTQ stuff. And one of the things that changed and I think prepared me for my faith transition was my heart became so softened and opened to LGBTQ people. And like David Archuleta, I was like listening to a lot of his videos and stuff, sharing his experiences. And my mind completely changed about all of that. And I know the Mormon church has kind of changed their stance on some of the issues there as well. But what I love about this pastor is, like, for example, with the Roe versus Wade thing being overturned, our pastor was, you know, talking about that there are people who are struggling with this and we need to love them and reach out to them. It's not our job to, you know, blast in their face like, "Ha ha, Christians win. We got abortion, you know, overturned." And I just like his perspective on sticking to like biblical truths while still being so compassionate, empathetic, loving, Christ-like. He's not telling us all to go out there and like tell everyone else they're wrong. You know what I mean? So that was a really good sign to me. I don't know, everything we've learned there has been really good. And my husband and I both had like great feelings there. If we're gonna try to like trust our gut instinct, it just feels like the right place for us because of all those reasons.
And this is the Christ Church of the Valley?
No, that was the one that I thought maybe. Yeah, CCV.
Oh,
Did
okay.
I say?
Yeah, no, you mentioned that in our
Oh, okay.
and I just thought that was the church you ended up at. So okay, I got it. So
No, it's a different church.
oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So
It's on a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is I think, yeah, I'm comfortable saying it. It's Desert Springs Community Church.
Okay. Well, this is really fascinating to me to hear your spiritual journey and visiting all these churches. You know, of course, I was an atheist for like 12 years, and now I'm kind of just doing my own thing. You know, I don't belong to a church. I do just attend different church services here and there. So half of them are restorationist churches, though. You know, I was spoken at the Community of Christ in Bradenton, Sarasota, which was our LDS. You know, so I have a connection to the restoration churches as well, which is I'm kind of trying to get each other to talk to each other and find common ground in areas that we can.
I love that you're such a peacemaker. You just like want everyone to be united.
I do, because I think it's really important that we, you know, I always just tell people, I don't care what building you go to on Sunday morning. God don't care what building you go to on Sunday morning. Do you have a personal relationship with the Savior? Is he the Lord of your life? but more importantly, are you showing the fruits of the Spirit? And are you allowing Christ's love to work through you? And as long as I see that, I'm cool, right? Because that's the most important thing. By their fruits you will know them. And where I see good fruit, I want to engage it. And so I try to engage it that way. And also recognize that, I like your pastor's approach. Don't rub it in people's noses or faces about things, about the political stuff, the cultural issues. I think that's very important, because I think that's one of the weaknesses of the evangelical church, is that we tend to be very combative and hurtful towards people. And I'm glad that you said the things about LGBTQ people, because I think that's a group of people that really need to be, we need to show Christian love. And I don't think sometimes they do see that from the evangelicals as well. So I'm glad that you found a church that is loving of people, still has its beliefs and principles, but the most important commandment, the most important principle is love, and loving your neighbor. And I think that's really awesome that you found a place that is a good fit for you and your family. And I think this should be instructive to our audience, wherever you're at. There's gonna be bumpy roads. They're going to run into churches where you're going to leave halfway through. And there's many times I wish I had done that more often myself. But I think, Haleigh, you really just, I find this is just a fascinating life and a story that's continuing to unfold. And it's really cool that you're sharing it, because of course you used to do everything on YouTube, so everybody got to see the blow by blow daily, and you've chosen not to do that. But I think it's important that you continue to have this, tell people your story. I just think this is really awesome, and I do think the Lord is doing a work in your life.
Thanks. I've watched your a lot of your stuff, Steve, too. I watched your whole Mormon stories thing on what you think a change in the Mormon church, and it's very fascinating. I really enjoyed hearing your perspective too, and your whole background and upbringing and stuff. Life's a journey, man, and it's crazy where it takes us. And I have a baby now, and last week my husband's uncle said, "When is the baby going to be baptized?" And I had to be honest and say, our kids go to church and they participate in learning about the Bible there. They learn about the Bible and Jesus at home, and we want them to know him and to love him and to have a desire to follow him. And when they are ready to proclaim their faith and commit to following him for the rest of their lives, they will do that as soon as they're ready, when they want to make that decision. And it's a hard thing to change your mind on things and break cultural norms and traditions, and I don't know, maybe risk offending or upsetting people, but it's a journey for us to figure it out. And I truly feel like now I am living my most authentic life. And even I kind of mentioned, I've looked more into the secular side of things. I've researched a little bit about the authenticity of the flood and Adam and Eve and stuff like that. And I don't know, it doesn't harm my faith, and I don't feel like I need to even go to a church that claims to be 100% accurate and we know it all and we have all the answers. And it's okay for me if someone believes it's literal and maybe I don't believe it's entirely literal or whatever. I'm okay with not having everything be so black and white, right and wrong, true or false. I'm just kind of going with the flow. I love Jesus. I feel like he's a big part of my life. He's guided me, and I'm super happy. And I feel like he knows me and loves me, and it's a great place to be, especially compared to where I once was, in a unhappy spot, even though I thought, the church had it all for me, but this turns out to be better for me.
Wow, Rebecca, what do you think of this, man? What a great story, huh?
I know, it is a great story, and I just love to hear more about your journey, because Steve's right. You shared it at one point on YouTube, and now people are like, what's she doing now? But I think it reminds me of, and I'll turn the phrase around, lots of times when people leave the church, the phrase is, where will you go? What will you do? They can't even imagine there could be anything on the other side. And I think so many people have shown, no, there really is. So I think I'm more fascinated, not where will you go, but to watch what you will do now, right? Where you will go. So I love that. So we will keep watching and following for sure, because it's not over. I'm sure of that.
Wow, that's great. Well, I just want to kind of wrap this up, Haleigh, and I want to ask you a question. And I've been asking this question. I actually asked 3 questions. I'm just going to ask one question for you today. And I just want you to kind of share with our audience. And the question is, who is Jesus to you?
Oh, come on.
Steve, come on.
Do people cry on your channel?
They cry all the
Oh,
time.
she has so much to say. Oh, it's wonderful.
Who is Jesus to me? Man. Wow, I was not expecting this. He's like my ride or die. Like no matter where I've been or what I've believed or what I've done, I found him in Mormonism and I know he was there. I find him here where I'm at now. I felt him guiding me and leading me through things that were difficult. I truly believe that it was part of God's plan for me to be in the Mormon church, to marry my ex-husband, to go through my faith crisis, my divorce, to lead me to where I am now. Like that peace we talked about. I felt that when I met my husband now, that like undeniable peace. And like, I've never felt that before. And that to me is Christ. He is the Prince of Peace. And I feel his love and his hand in my life. And I love that I don't have to be perfect. I'm not on a mission of perfection to get to the highest level of the celestial kingdom anymore. I know he takes me as I am, as imperfect as I am, but because he loves me and died for me, he wants all of me. It doesn't matter that I am a flawed, sinful human. And yeah, he's like I said, he's my ride or die. He's got my back no matter what, and he's always there for me. And because I love him, I try to follow him and teach my kids about him and to love others the way I think he would. That's one of the biggest things for me coming out of Mormonism, is having this open, softened heart, like I said, with LGBTQ people, with all people, instead of trying to, look at people in a lens of they need to be more like me as a Mormon. They need to fit into this Mormon sphere. They can be who they are. I know God loves them, accepts them. And kind of like you said, like people's fruits, who people are in their hearts, like that's what matters. And I feel so much more love for people now because I think I'm looking at Jesus in my opinion, the right way instead of the lens I had before. I feel much more love for people, and I love them for myself, for my kids. And it's a beautiful thing for me. It's a totally different perspective on life. And it's a lot happier. So I think that's where I'll sum it up.
Oh, Haleigh, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story today and sharing about Jesus, what he's done for you, and how much he means to you. Because I really always want to try to bring the conversation back to him whenever it's appropriate. And Rebecca, I want to thank you for co-hosting today. What another great episode, huh?
It was as good as I knew it would be, even better.
So I just want to thank you so much for coming on. You really blessed us today, Haleigh.
Thanks. I'm so happy that I got to talk to you guys.
It was great. And so, folks, I give you your comments. What do you think? What do you think of her journey? I'd like to hear what you have to say. I want to hear from Christians. I want to hear from atheists. And I want to hear from members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. All your perspectives are valued and appreciated. And I just want to remind you folks, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification button for when a new episode will come out. Also, our podcast we're on all the major podcast formats. We just had a record-setting month in January for our podcast format. So we're really excited about that. So don't forget to check out our podcast format. And also there will be links in the description for those of you who want to financially support the program, whether it's on MormonBookReviews.com. We have our merch store, hats, coffee mugs, or hot chocolate mugs, sorry. And
I
other
wish I had something to hold up. I need a hat.
I need a hat. We should send you one. And so
Gotta send her one, Steve.
Yes, we should probably do that. And so then, of course, if you want to financially support the show, you can. There will be links in the description to support us on Patreon as well as PayPal. But just remember, the most important thing, folks, is this: all the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.